as like the previous conversation that I missed just now, which I assume is on the topic of a speaker that consists of art and legal. We have 3 artists and a lawyer. From my right is Silas Wu. Yes, Silas Wu, who is an artist. If you've seen this book before, he does like really realistic hand drawings, and he is currently having a solo exhibition at Backroom, so make sure you check that out. Next to him is we have Kimberly Goldbeer, who is many things: an artist, a curator, a writer, and also she does awesome jewelry. Currently she is busy as an art worker and also an author. She's cooking something up, I'm not allowed to share it. Next to her is Dan Iliani, who is a multidisciplinary artist. You might see her works like performance art and like photography, photo manipulation and more, not just limited to that. Currently she is also running a community called AXF, which is an art X fashion community meetups. It started as a meetup. It's basically like wanted to create a casual sharing space for art and fashion to just like talk and share the experiences, because the thing about like after leaving an institution or any kind of practice, you tend to go into the business side of things straight away. You don't have space to just like build community. So that's what this basically is. You can check that out on Instagram too. And next, at the end of that, is Paul Rafiq, who is a lawyer and a writer, and currently he is the co-founder of RX Law. So RX Fashion, RX Law, you can follow that both, they're 2 separate things. What they do is they do a lot of like legal work around the art industry, and also they are currently working on something, which is they are working on supporting organizing work around the Gig Workers Act. So that's something you can ask them about it later. So jumping straight into the conversation of artists making work, and then the subtitle is The Artist as a Business. I think, I want to unpack with you guys, like, because the idea of the artist as a business, the idea of business itself is transactional, and it exists outside the space of after the artwork is done, right? Outside the studio. So I wanted to unpack a little bit as a public, how does labor exist for each of you as an artist inside the studio before it transcends outside? Anybody can start this? Maybe like you, like. How is art as labor and not just like as a product?
Yeah, I guess I can go first. I feel like art for me is like just natural, like breathing. Like I just can't stop doing it. It's kind of compulsive in a way, and yeah, it's great to be able to do it full time. You know, it would be great to do it full time. But unfortunately, life is not all about like constancy. Sometimes as artists, maybe we choose this field because we feel the need to feel safe. So we tend to end up maximizing our time alone to create whatever we want. And then the hard part, of course, is showing that part of yourself, that side of yourself to the world. Yeah. But so yeah, I just can't stop. It's the opposite.
Well, for me, I feel like the business side of art takes the fun out of the making, because it's really hard. You have to switch your brain between like, oh, I want to create this, I'm going to vibe in this, right? But then the other side of me is like, will this sell? How am I going to make money? How am I going to make money? And it takes the fun out of it, because now I'm added another layer to the stress that I'm already feeling, and the emotion of that stress will go into the work itself. So I guess it's trying to separate the two from the day to day, so that you have to make the art and then figure out what's next right there.
Okay, so the question was actually I forgot my exact question, but it's the vibe is Hana is behind like in the studio because when the topic itself is like artist as a business, business is after it leaves the studio, after it leaves the artist space. So how does work exist for you within your own private space?
I think that's quite an interesting question because I still to this day don't really have a studio. So it's kind of like I work from wherever, however circumstances wise permits, right? So I think I've always struggled with the notion of or idea of business. And then when we talk about labor, like as what Silas was saying, right? It's as artists we have was telling someone we have a very itchy soul, and it's so itchy that we need to scratch, and that's kind of like what happens when you want to create an artwork, right? And then you kind of forget that in that process of being in your solitude and whatnot, it doesn't feel like labor. It feels something that just so happens is so natural and intrinsic to you as a person. But when it happens in suddenly somebody comes into commission or it goes to a certain proportion and people kind of get to know about you, then like your label becomes a bit more prominent because now somebody gets to say something about that process. Whether it's a certain limitation of a deadline, an expectation, and all these things come into place, right? That's why essentially then you realize that, oh, this is work, this is labor. And I think there's tension in that being something so passionate, and I think as Malaysians or Asians in general in school, it has a lot to do with this idea of the romanticization of talking about art, and we talk about it a lot more in that sense and not so much in the sense of work. You know, it gets a bit separated because it feels a bit like it can't exist in the same space. So oftentimes you don't know how to navigate in those spaces because it's like Kim says, a different language altogether. So I think it is a slow burning process for me to kind of realize my own labor because it's so natural for me, but to an extent of understanding how it's going to unroll in the future, it is my vitality that's being asked, it's my time that's being asked, and even at times, or most of the time, my emotional and mental capacity. Because not all projects are easy to kind of partake in, right? There's a lot of different value systems, I would say, that kind of happens in the layers of it all. So I think there's that constant tension between trying to figure out how to value myself better, what is labor, and in the process of it also, whose labor is it involving? Not just mine, but the before and the afters, all this kind of unknown that's uncredited also is involved. So it's a very, it's a process you just kind of gotta go through and have a conversation on to kind of unpack and see. Yeah.
Yeah, before we get to Carl, I actually like that you brought up about unseen interconnected labor, because whenever we think about art labor, we're not only thinking about the artists and the artwork, the institutions that hold or display the artworks. There are also like framers, installers, transporters, and mounters, semua itulah yang not taken into account into the art labor thing. And also, I think when we talk about artist labor within the studio, it exists so diverse. Like even just between three of you, it's like different medium, different like framework of mind, and then it changes also throughout times and show. Because I remember when I first saw Silas's work, it's like pen drawing, but then at some point you got metal work, and then there's like a whole wrists and interconnected labor related to that. And then I remember when Kim's early hour was hair, that was the early hours that I remember. And then like now she's doing like giant ceramic pieces, dining table at Ilham, so like it's a whole thing, right? But I guess what I would like to hear from a more law perspective is that the fact that everyone's labor format is very diverse, but we're all falling under this umbrella of art. And what are we missing out when we don't have like a lump sum of everything? I don't know if I'm framing this question correctly. And also like what are the ways we like, because they all exist so differently. To standardize things would be like to diminish or like to like flatten them, right? So how would we work to translate whatever information we have so that we can gain the benefits and securely navigating to legal stuff in our practice? Yeah.
Thanks. I think that's a difficult question, but it must begin with attention to these are the experts of their own work, right? And when we're thinking about questions of labor, we must look at it from the perspective of those who do it, right? So we must pay attention to the details and try to fit whether it's laws, whether it's an ecosystem of regulations and policies and market standards or industry practices to what is necessary here. So for example, a lot of artists are not employed full time. Yeah? So we take that's one example. And a lot of them are in this kind of self-employed or freelance capacity, right? So how do we think about social protection in those cases? If you are a full-time employee, you get SOCSO, right? Artists deal with all kinds of physical work, but even when they're not physical, they're exposed to injuries and all kinds of other risks. But they don't have SOCSO as a right, mostly because of the freelance and employment status. So how do you do it? For this SOCSO, you have to pay monthly. And artists don't get monthly, right? Sometimes they get lump sum, sometimes not at all. I think it's interesting to go into some of the questions of what the kind of usual complaints we get on the public as lawyers in this art sector. But ultimately, so then decided with discussion from some artists who demanded, hey, we deserve SOCSO too. So these are not visual artists, you know. Actually, a lot of them were artists from music and film. Said that we must have for the creative sector as well. Why then? Because they're much more organized. Yeah? And I want to talk about that as well. I think it's important later on. But essentially, so they demanded that SOCSO extend social protection for the arts, but have a lump sum payment instead of a monthly payment. Yeah? And to incentivize that, the government and SOCSO also agreed to subsidize it. You know, but they have a quota as to how many take-ups per year now. But ultimately, this was one out of a kind of contestation struggle for demand or rights to fit the specific conditions and working styles of artists. So I think perhaps that's one interesting way to kind of look at it.
Okay, sorry, I kind of zoned out a bit to be honest, but that was a lot. Okay, so like where I was going with this is that I'm also wondering, like, as an artist, like, how do you organize yourself? Because just now the early conversation is about like how labor exists within your own private space as you make the work and conceive your idea into life, whatever form. But like, how do you organize yourself when it's time to take it out to the world and bring it to galleries and all that? I'm sure there are like steps that you take to keep yourself safe and secure, whether you want to share it in the form of like the steps you have taken to feel safe, or any failures or mistakes that you learned along the way that have helped protect yourself when you want to work with an external party to exhibit, sell your works.
Another long question to sit with. Whoa, what did I sign up for? Okay, you'll probably hear me say I don't know a lot, but I think that's part of the process and the tensions in place that I think we need to kind of have this conversation about. Okay, I'll start from the very beginning that I think for a lot of artists, in any way, or even just as a fresh graduate in whatever field, you kind of just try and see what works, right? And then, of course, whenever something doesn't work and you know that it's kind of, you feel there's a dynamic, then you know, oh, okay, so I learned this and whatnot. And I think when it comes to artists in general, in that regard, there's a lot more to lose at times, because there's not much of a safety net other than perhaps your savings, which is not a very smart move financially. Guilty. But you know, I really hoped that when I was younger, I had sort of a mentor to tell me these things, so I know what would work and what would not work. But besides that point, it's really a hit and miss, and I think as you start off, it's a lot about just being on guard, right? But I think over time, you learn quite painfully at times that this is kind of the only mode of learning. And I need you to reiterate again because I feel like there's so many tensions to that, so put on the question, please. I cannot. I need to know the question in a different way.
The question was, okay, you kind of answered already. The first half of my question was that, like, how do you navigate when you from inside your own practice and then want to jump into the external world? And what we got from that is sometimes a lot of the modes that you have to operate within in the beginning, or sometimes different modes is that you have to learn from that. Unfortunately, for some of us, that might cause being a higher risk. And then I guess the other side to that question would be like, have you had any specific learning experience from like that actually happened to you that you're comfortable to share?
I think you learn to navigate these things creatively, especially so, for instance, don't have any lawyer friends before, don't know any lawyer, don't even know where to begin, was a bit scared with anything legal or anything confrontational. So you talk to your friends in the community, and that's kind of like how you move forward. It's a lot of collective feedbacks. Also kind of like a way to push back, especially at times when you know some things are dodgy. You might just feel it, but you don't know how to articulate it. But when you have kind of like a group of people, it helps to kind of have a general idea, and sometimes even show kind of like our notes with like how this person worked with this person and this was the outcome. Why? What should we be aware of next time? So you mobilize in your community in a certain way because that's the only way you know how after your work goes out. I think the problem also is there's so many different tiers and different, I guess like roles or bodies in arts as an ecosystem. Like yourself is one, the labor in terms of like the logistics of people who transport your work or you're famous is another. Curators is a different thing, galleries is a different thing, institutions is a different thing, and they will all have different interests or stakes in it, right? So becoming aware of that was a slow process because then you kind of know like, oh, okay, this person operates differently in this way. So it's very easy throughout when you're navigating to feel like your labor is being taken advantage of because it's a different interests that they have in your practice that may not be something you want to partake or find value in. So I find that a lot of my failures is just a difference of value systems at times, that rather than partaking in orang ni salah, orang ni tak salah, to a certain extent that does happen. I will agree that does happen, but it's having an open-ended conversation so that we understand how these different modes operate and whether or not I'm aware of the expectations in place. That tends to happen, that tends to kind of like fly over me, especially when I was a bit younger. And then you start to feel like, oh no, I'm completely taken advantage of. I did not know I would get into this space, and then it tends to become resentment at times. So I think having an open-ended conversation kind of helps to understand how labor moves, what is your rights clearly kind of like openly discussed about would really help.
Try to refresh the question, right? Okay. Labor. For me, I feel like because I do a lot of things and I try not to put all of my eggs in one basket. So I end up doing a lot of hobbies that in turn become hustles. Jewelry making is one of it. Writing and illustrating children's books is another one of it. And I'm also an art worker. I'm a curator and a gallery assistant. Yeah. So I want to know every step it takes from getting the art in my studio to the walls of the gallery. And I also want to be in control in every point of where that work ends up. And that's why I take on a lot of these jobs, because I want to learn the system. I want to learn how I can manage the art and how to handle it with care. Because I feel like a lot of the times I have encountered my art getting mishandled, maybe in the hands of framers, in the hands of galleries, in the hands of buyers even. Yes, so it's a tough process to learn all of this over the years, but that's so okay, because it also helps to bring in the money for me to make the art more mind-free.
So you have to worry about surviving.
Yes.
Then you can focus on express.
Yes. So the creativity will flow. It will always flow. You just have to manage the time properly. And I'm a spreadsheet girl. I love my spreadsheets. I love to do my time slot. Okay, this is my timeline. This is what I'm doing. I'm in production phase now, and then I'm in gallery phase now, and I'm in this phase now. So it's a lot of start to finish that I want to know every little point because of all the experiences I've had before. Yeah. So it's led into this.
I don't think there's much else we can say. I think when I set out to be an artist, or ever since I was a young age, I always knew that what this job basically is an adventure. It's your own boss. You are responsible for everything. And then the rest is just luck, sure. But no matter what, you're gonna mess up. I think I've messed up countless. I might even be messing up right now, I don't even know. Yeah, I think the more interesting question is how do you carry on working when right after you mess up? How do you not let it bother you, especially as someone who works with your emotions? Especially as someone who maybe has a tendency to avoid certain things because it's difficult or it's shame. So someone who wants to, I guess, manage how manage every single part of what you do. I think that's part of it. It's you're already an artist, you're already making art, and that includes all these different things, aspects that you are responsible for. And I think you always have to acknowledge that there's more to learn, there's more to deal with, there's more to understand. There's always all these shady people who do the industry, and there's always people who need to be shady by and there's always people who come across as shady but actually are really, really nice and really, really great. And it's up to you to discern all these things because of the industry itself. What you're offering is so unique. Every single artist is so unique in what they do. There's no standard. In fact, if there was a standard, then you'd be a bad artist. Because I feel like everyone just needs to express themselves, and if you are just doing work that's not done. Yeah. So, and also yeah.
Thank you for bringing up the shady bit because
It's my favorite topic.
so like talking about shadiness in the industry, we'll get back to the thing, but like talking just side note talking about the shadiness because I think we all hang out. So we had like a conversation also yesterday about intention because sometimes some people be doing shady stuff because they have certain intention, but sometimes because they have to navigate a system within our space that sometimes does not cater to the way artists or art work and flows. So they have to force themselves to fit something that is formless and ever-changing into a box. So you have to compromise and force the taste. So it looks shady, but sometimes everyone's lost in the sauce of trying to navigate the system. So yeah, so thank you for bringing up about the shady stuff. And then just to like kind of like pinpoint that all three of you brought up like three different things that I think like makes up the great ingredient on like bringing your work into the public space. Danny brought up about like like just like learning from experience, but a key into sustaining learning experience is having community and being open to just talk to people in your practice about anything. And I think one of the conversation that we've had before was that it's uncomfortable to talk about money, but we all should be talking about money. And then also like organizing yourself because I know kids do as spreadsheets, I've seen them. So like spreadsheet goals, right? So like, I mean like, and I love that you brought up that you diversify your experience so that you can learn from every tier on how things move from studio to end, right? And apa benda tu? Because learning everything as a whole, understanding the whole system as a system, as a structure, you would know how to then organize yourself better in your own way. Not everyone's a spreadsheet girl, but if you're a spreadsheet girl and you understand the system, then it's easier for you to navigate through that. So yeah, I guess to just like goreng semua ni and bring it back to Carl is that because everyone has different ways of navigating the system and bringing your work outside, and based on the work of some of the works that Alim has done and hearing from other creators, what's usually you see that is missing that artists tend to do when they want to like bring their work into the public space?
Thanks. Okay, so perhaps before what's missing for artists, maybe we take a step back and look at the ecosystem, right? So I want to challenge a bit this idea of the focus of artists as entrepreneurs or artists as business personnel. In meetings with institutions, with governments, with private sectors, galleries, collectors, whatever, in all the different sectors, and they always say, you know why these artists are being exploited or they complain so much? It's because they don't know anything. This is usually a complaint that we hear from them. They don't know anything. They are supposed to be entrepreneurs. They're supposed to be executives, top managing CEO level kind of thing. Then why they want artists like whole company, right? But that's one thing. So this idea that the artist should be responsible for the faults of essentially the whole system. And it is systemic issues. We get complaints on a daily basis of non-payment of work, late payment, things like copyright infringement, exploitative and abusive deals and agreements and contracts. And these things are not individual. It's almost a system that's endorsed and practiced. It's not only in the visual arts, and this goes across sectors. But what's important to realize is that if you create work and it has value, what value are we talking about? Right? Value to your client, value to the person who commissions you, value to the public, value to your community, value to people who consume or enjoy it or get something from it, value to nation building, which is a big part of so many Madani grants now saying that you do something related to Madani fee for arts and culture, right? It's value, creating value and what? In political economy and law and ideas of policy, when you create value, what do you deserve? You deserve rights, okay? So that's a very fundamental thing. You deserve rights. And what rights are we talking about? Where you produce labor for value, you deserve socio-economic rights, and that includes your social protection, your basic ideas of living wage, and such similar things. And these are called labor rights. And labor rights come under the bigger framework of human rights. So we're talking not about some silly kind of fun thing that people just, it is something super serious, defended, argued upon, contested, and espoused by international law frameworks. There's this whole thing called artist rights. What are artist rights? Artist rights include your labor rights, your copyrights, your freedom of expression, and what's the other thing I said? That's another thing. But anyway, when we look at it that way, then we see things as a systemic issue. So artists as entrepreneurs is super helpful to learn the knowledge of doing your invoicing, knowing the regulations that are out there, what happens when payments aren't made, yeah, how to deal and look and negotiate upon agreements. Who here in your art practice or in your whatever practice that's related to printing usually deals with written contracts? One, two, minority. Because that's very clear. We get complaints all the time, and they're not clear with the contracts. Yeah, and this is a standard which is quite shameful for industry, which I think in 2024, it's almost 6% of the GDP, right? Arts and culture. Where it's supposed to be of a kind of professional standard, and I don't mean coming from the artists alone. State government, the private sector, they all have duties to implement to make sure that these labor human rights are fulfilled and protected and respected. Yeah? It is about the dignity of work and dignity of the artist. When you come to what was the question? Okay. So when we look at it from a systemic point of view, right? So you learn about laws, and we can go about the details of laws or not, but we must also understand that there is a kind of system of exploitation that's going on, and we don't want to talk about that. And a lot of things are framed as the artist's responsibility or the artist's fault, from my opinion. How do you want to discuss and negotiate a contract if you have no collective power? Right? Every gallery or commissioner, whatever that you work with, if you come up with your own version of a contract, the problem is that, who are you? Are you Ibrahim Hussein? Are you Latif Muhyiddin? No, right? You know what I mean? So usually the more powerful person gives you the agreement first, if at all. I think it's worth to say as well, a very practical level, people think that only on a signed paper is that a written agreement and evidence of contract. It's not. A verbal agreement is also contract. It's just that it's harder to prove if you want to dispute it, right? So what do? When you have a verbal agreement, you email back then, this was what was discussed earlier, thank you, as we proceed, we agree on these terms, okay? So when they reply, they said, now you do this work, whatever not. That is a clear evidence of the contract agreement. And that can be proved in court, and us lawyers or whatnot will help you, and communities or organizations that help you can use that, and the work is much more easier. So once you realize about the issues of it not being an individual matter, that it's a shared responsibility matter, and there is a kind of exploitative element to the labor of artists, then you realize that you need the power. Once you know all this business stuff also, if you do your invoicing, you do your agreements and everything, people don't respect what you're doing. The only real way is what perhaps is good to learn from other sectors and other jurisdictions. is to collectively organize yourselves, right? Collectively organize yourselves into kind of artists, associations or collectives, not for networking. It's about sharing resources, how much you've been paid, what are gallery standards, everything from social protection, whether they have artist fees, whether certain exhibitions have production fees, and then from that you gather together and then you help to advocate for changes. Galleries, for example, should ideally have their own association where they are having a dialogue with artist associations of market segments. We have never had this before. So where is the conversation going? Whoever has, somebody puncak kuasa, who is at the top right now, who has the ears of the most powerful people, or most powerful, they will be the ones deciding things for you. Market standards, the laws, the policy reforms, everything. So the only way to get into that is to have a social dialogue by organizing collectively, so you get collective power to help push what we want change, But I just wanted to raise the issue for fun.
Thank you, Carl. Also, I think I wanted to add on to that point. As someone who also having to navigate few projects and involved with multiple parties, what we realize also is not the system does not want to build for the fluidity and the diversity of art. And second, also it does not. It's very city-centric. Because I remember when we wanted to work with people outside of the city, it's a whole different ballpark, Like grants would want you to have like invoicing system, whatever. But if you work with our couple, maybe for cash, so it does not like really help the gear move and help us to collaborate outside of city in a better way. And also, orang kampung not easy to navigate all this grant system. It's one's language and all this filing, cari printer, maybe printer jauh, stuff like that we don't think about, but it's actually it's a more struggle for civil groups. So I just want to pin that there. Before I get into the next question, if you guys look on the left, right, also there's a QR code. If you want to ask the panel a question, if you're a bit shy later, want to raise your hand, you can ask here, and I will try to get to those questions. So yeah, it's right there and over there. Okay. I have another question that I wanted to bring to everyone, and I think, I don't know, I feel like I want to open this question to the floor, kind of also, so if you guys have an idea, you can raise a hand, but I'll post it to you guys first. The question would be what is something that will help the art sector a lot in terms of better working conditions and welfare? Maybe here first, and then later, after they're done, if anyone will be like, I got something, I got tea, let's go.
Transparency on how much everyone is getting paid. Because there is such a big difference from all the different art workers and art workers from galleries, from institutions, from even those that are making our frames, our mountings and all of that. Everyone is getting paid differently because we're not talking about how much we're actually getting paid. So I think we need someone to gather all of that information and help advocate for us so that we all get a fair share of that.
Just to intersect, speaking of gathering, forms are boring, but forms can change the world. So can you, it's like also, I know forms are boring, but it really helps gather data for whatever we want to advocate with. So if you ever see some art worker or art friends asking to fill out form, if you want things to keep going and you want to support us, just fill out the form.
I guess for me, kind of relating that to what Kim says, but perhaps from a more to look at way back in education in school, or just in general with the whole idea of art in Malaysia itself, to talk about whether it's labor, whether it's money, whether it's art, and whether it's work, and all these other things, is to look back. I think as creatives or artists, I would kind of say that a lot of it is quite emotive in nature, quite intuitive in nature. So the topic about money, in essence, relates back to self-esteem. I think a lot of it does to a lot of creatives and artists, I would say. Because we were brought up in a certain climate of, look at how government schools treat art. Look at how state treats art. You know, and there's a lot of talking about doing it passionately, that to a certain extent trying to price your work feels almost a bit like you get shamed a bit in the process of trying to put value in your work, because the idea is that it should be a bit free, out of goodness of your heart, you have to be generous and yada yada yada, you know, but it's work. And I think we also emulate that language, and it also turns into self-esteem. And I speak from a point of view of myself as well in my relationship with money. We have to look at people's background, socioeconomic conditions, where they come from, what kind of family did they come from, are their family financially literate, do they know how to do financial keeping, are they, you know, it's a lot to talk about finances, and if it doesn't happen from the nucleus of a family, most of the time you don't know how to manage your finances. And that translates into your art. Also the fact that your self-esteem translates into your art, because you don't think it's worthwhile, that you don't understand the value that you're partaking in. And going back to perhaps my earlier days of like doing art markets and whatnot, there was a lot of conversation in this that came up from the idea of our self-esteem, because a lot of them feel a certain way about, I don't really want to scale, I don't want to become a creative entrepreneur. Like in my nature, I don't feel that way either, but there are also times when you get shaped by the idea that like, oh no, but you have to make a living, you know? So between living and survival and what you feel that is authentic to you and your self-esteem, you get quite lost in the sauce of it, of trying to navigate what you actually want from your art. So I would dare say perhaps more conversations about how and to kind of understand our relationship with money and what do we actually want from our art practices. Perhaps some of us don't want to create as a form of business, and that's fine. That doesn't mean you're a hobbyist or all these other things that might be thrown at you, but it just means that your value system might be different, and you don't need to compartmentalize it in that kind of idea. But it's still work. At the basis of it all, it's still work, it's still labor, and it still deserves a certain level of value. So I would say, from a perspective of education in whatever capacity, to talk about how we feel and how we relate to money, so that we understand what we want from our art. And essentially, well, with money comes a certain bit of responsibility and power in the entire system. That with it, we can do so much more art as well. That we need to understand that you need money to make art. You know, so I think being able to have an open conversation about that across would really help to make one, the practice of art more sustainable, and two, to understand the expectations that you have over your practice, so that you know what it entails in the process of when people start commissioning, or maybe institutions start kind of like approaching you, so you in general know kind of like the parameters of how much you want to grow, what would it entail in the entire process in the long run, so you don't get trapped into an idea of being victimized in general. Because I think another thing I would put is most of the times it's a slow burning process when I don't know what the right word is right now, but you don't get taken advantage of out of the bat out of nowhere. It might be a slow burning process, and then suddenly something goes wrong. Yes, because a lot of art, most of the time, the process of making it is relational. It's relationships. It's people you know, that sometimes, in some ways, expectations weren't properly cleared out in the beginning, or couldn't be cleared out in the beginning because things change. So, yeah, I would say just an open place to have these messy conversations, and to, in a way, be okay with talking about money as if it's not art as well. You know, it's an idea of, it's an uncomfortable idea in the beginning, especially say if I know Kim wants to present me with a project. She wants to commission me or something. It's a bit uncomfortable to go, okay, how much are you paying me? Because she's my friend. I would want to be able to kind of go like, hey, yeah, of course, right? And in a way, our worlds are deeply connected because it's already a small industry, right? So if Kim was somebody who felt, oh, she wants to talk about money when it's like we're friends, it's a bit uncomfortable. So we do have this kind of like weird characters every now and then, but we need to figure out how to start talking about it as if it's not dirty or it's not like anything but about work.
Sorry, Mr. Pat, I think like also there's also that weird romanticization where like sometimes if artists talk about money, it feels like you're thinking just about money and not about your art and things, so I think we need to stop that. But yeah, Silas, maybe you have any input. The question was really good. What is something that will help the art sector a lot in terms of better working conditions and welfare?
Yeah, I feel like everyone has hit the nail on the head, especially individual. I can't offer much experience in that sense. I think, I don't think there's anything else to add.
That's what was up here. Maybe anyone else have anything they wanted to add? Like, we should have this and we should have that.
Wait, hold on, one second. Wait,
It's cold.
I think artists in general just need their audacity to just ask for what they want and be transparent about it. Like that's okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Jacob. I'm one of the curators here. And adding to what Carl said about the arts ecosystem, to have a systemic change, so Reform Artsy has the foundation for Seni Inputs and more. So that has like 5 calls of like changing fundamentally of the arts policy in Malaysia. First is to have a dedicated ministry for arts and culture and taking tourism out of it. So there's a dedicated ministry, 0.1% of federal budget for the arts. Then, of course, it's the artists' rights, free speech, our labor rights, all the other little things that's also. Then arts education and a 15-year blueprint, so that if there's a change of government and ministers, it will still continue to be more or less the same, and governments will just follow through. So having this will certainly help. And I think for artists ourselves, perhaps we could have like a union, we could unionize. And gallery side, of course, they should have a gallery association. Singapore has that. So it should be the same for Malaysia to have systemic change that way. That's our questions. Adding to what Carl said.
Can I just respond to that? I think that's great. Listening to some competition is a great start. Just to add, actually, unfortunately, if you are a freelancer or self-employed person in Malaysia, you don't have rights to unionize. Mahathir made sure. It was during the British colonial era and during Mahathir's time where trade union laws were very much curtailed to fight back against labor movements. So this affects artists as well today. So you cannot unionize, but what can you do? first formalize yourselves as collectives, yeah, as friends, as a collective, and then after that you can register yourself as a kind of trade or guild association. Yeah, so an artist, you can be whatever, you know, a sculpture guild association, whatever. But we have a lot of these associations, yeah, actually, but they mostly focus on the aesthetic or funding, that is to get good shows and things like that, or networking. What we don't have currently, which is very critical thing, is the issue around working conditions, is around your labor rights, is around these matters which concern the things that you need to do before you can even start work, which is life, right? Eat, clothes, home. So yes, but at Aling, we're also very happy. We're discussing with other sectors right now, including visual arts, to how to organize collectively. So we're happy to do workshops and things like this, so that you can first do it informally, what needs to be discussed, what the laws and opportunities out there that can help you, and then on the practical level, but also on the policy level. And then after that, we work towards a longer term mission of registering it formally, so that the government then, so the advantage of having a registered organization and under proper union style laws is that whenever you say, hey, we have a problem, a lot of artists insurance will not covered for this project, you can call upon the government and the employers, whether it's the galleries, institutions, whatever, to say that we must have a meeting tomorrow over this issue to resolve it over agreement and contract. And if people refuse to attend or don't want to discuss with you, it can be a crime, right? Or it can be an offense. You can bring them to court. So you force people to the table so that everyone listens to each other. And you need that. It's the normal thing, social dialogue. Your 8-hour workday, your 8-hour workday and 8 hour of rest and 8 hours to do what we will was fought for by labor unions, right? For centuries. And it was a bloody affair, right? And today we have the benefit of that, the 8-hour workday, but it has regrets. Now a lot of people work 14-hour workdays, 16-hour workdays, 20-hour workdays, something happens, right? And because our labor movements have been weakened, yeah, they've been systemically and structurally weakened. And this is a proactive effort, yeah, by a lot of owners of capital. So what is needed to be done is that artists must see themselves as workers, in the same intertwined fate as factory workers, as company workers, as people at the docks, as people, fishermen and things like that, yeah? Because all these labor laws are tied together, really. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Carl. Would anybody else like to add what we need in the sector? Maybe not yet. Maybe it can be added to be at some point. Like this is what I think should be added. But what I just wanted to add in to flourish is that advocacy and activism and advocacy for your rights does not have to look like a boring black and white. Okay, I'm still saying the form is important, but like it does not have to just look that way, because the fact that we are being in the arts, activism and advocacy can come in many ways, and you can insert your artistic input into it. I remember we went to that Freedom Film Fest. They had like a censorship conference. Okay. They had a censorship conference. What was interesting was that they had like a sticky note thingy since the whole day, and people can tapal what you hope or your vision for the future of our ecosystem, something like that. So throughout the day, people are joining conferences, talks, workshops, watching films. They filled up those things, and then by the end of the day, Taka, our Suiko, awesome experimental musician, what she did was she took everything, she cooked some music thingy by the end of the conference to talk about like hopes, and it become like a chanting hope thingy for like artists and art workers by the end of the session. So this is just to like add to that your advocacy does not have to be boring. It can be cool, fun, quirky in any way that you like. But yeah, I think that's the question from the panel. I got a few questions from the QR. Let me just pick one out. Okay, this one is kind of like a pushback to whatever we've been talking about, like collectivizing and gathering community. Who is the collective actually speaking for, and who often gets left out of that we? Because most marginalized artists are rarely the ones with time to attend the meeting. How do we accommodate that? Anyone can do this?
Okay. That's a really good question, and I will start off first by saying that these are things that we ourselves are navigating, so there's no clear-cut answer towards it as well. Because if we're talking from the perspective of collectivizing, it means starting from wherever, whichever way we can, right? Because it also goes back to whatever resources we can fork out from our own. You know, in various different capacities that, you know, we are able to not just financially, but of course we talk about time. And we also need to talk about the capacity in terms of when we come to labor is emotional and mental work. And so that is also a very big part of community work that goes into it, that is an unseen form of labor in fact. So, and when we're talking about these things, I remember I'll bring about a conversation me and Anissa had, in which we are working on the project for Art Extraction together, which is also under KL Festival. And for me, it was my first time organizing to a certain degree, with the aspect of it being under, you know, being funded. That means there's a certain output. That means there's a certain timeline that you must operate everything within this kind of like timeline that's given by, you know, being tethered to all these things. And one of the tensions that we talk about was what it was like to kind of like start from from wherever we are at and what we can do, and also looking from the perspective of making space without space, and how does that look like? And the other part is, we realize a lot of what it means to collectivize is, most of the time, it's a huge learning curve of just starting from our needs and then growing from there, and then changing it and evolving it according to the people who show up. So I think there's a lot to do with showing up, so that we actually know, okay, when we present our problems and our issues, then people in the space have a certain awareness, like, okay, this is kind of like what we all are going through, so what can we do? And we imagine how we can possibly move forward towards that. But the other idea is to kind of break our silence. Is that the way to say it? Maybe, yeah, our silence. Because there's also the problem of us being very identified to our idea and our struggles. Like, for instance, let's say people who are very, like for me, I'm quite strongly, I'm a feminist, but I've never been able to realize that actually what I struggle with might be the same as what people in factory workers struggle with too. So it's a certain sense of solidarity, instead of looking specific to just what I identify as and what I identify as my problems, to understand it's all relational. So I think that's a very important part about collectivizing and being open to kind of like that cross exchanges, whether you're a minority or whether you're marginalized and all these things, and bring it together to then have a conversation. Because I also realize we do have this capacity. For instance, I'm actually autistic, so there's also the capacity that I might not show up the same way as other people can show up. And we need to be okay with the levels of where people can show up. I cannot also, for instance, even if I try to provide space for people who need it more than I do, in fact, but they need to also be open to wanting to share, wanting that relationship to form. Because I cannot trespass, because it is a very, it's kind of that we all operate from a certain level of trauma as well, in respect to all the ways that we form, we navigate in the world. So there's a certain level of care and understanding that we need to kind of form to get to a certain place where we are ready enough to take it up a notch, even in fact. Because I think all of us have things here and there that requires a lot of conversations to untie the little knots before we can take it up to a different place that things can happen practically. And I think that's a lot to do with in the art world, in all the different spheres of it. So there's no clear-cut answer to that other than like being a place where people want to engage and showing up is the best first step that I can think of.
Before I add on, anyone else would like to contribute? Okay. What was the question? The question was, the scrolling. And I think just to summarize the question is like whenever we talk about we and collectivizing, there will be some people that will be left out, and what do we do about it to like accommodate for more when we talk about like collectivizing it, the idea of we and moving towards something. If you have anything to add, you can, or not, we can talk about most of it. My Tapangara was, I love this analogy that a friend gave a while ago. A lot of things can be understood like a lasagna. This is the context that she was saying that education is like lasagna, it's like theory, practical. So I think like the idea of organizing and collectivizing, the first step definitely showing up in creating space. And space, I'm not talking about physical. Space can be in any form. We can create the space. But there will always be people who like might not be able to attend or missing out. So what I'm saying in the idea of lasagna, this context of kuihapis, if you want, is that you do the activity, experience, adjust the structure. Jalan the activity, adjust the structure. But you just gotta keep going, because if you don't do it and wait for a perfect moment for it to actually happen, it's not gonna happen. You gotta make mistakes, and you gotta like you wouldn't know who's left out without having to do it and see who's left out and then adjust it. So I think the thing about organizing and then collectivization, you just gotta keep going, but also as the person within the community and organizing, have the empathy and the responsibility of needing to adjust as you go and the inputs you get. So, lasagna. Okay, we have time, I think. The other question is a bit long. Let me try and pick one. Oh, okay, let's pick a little swap one last thing. Just take a break then. How much do artists actually get from getting their work sold in the gallery? It's a bit like straight cut kind of question 10 as fellow gallerists.
Okay, so the standard is 50-50. A lot of galleries take 50% of the sale, and they justify this because they are doing your marketing, the publicity, they are setting up the food for the opening, and then they pay the rent to keep the lights on for the 2 to 4 weeks that your show is on. And they are also the ones that are liaising with the buyers. We are opening up to their set of contacts for buyers. So they take 50-50. But there are some spaces that will take 40%, and some spaces will also take 30%. And 30% is really, really great already. And most of those spaces are considered as event spaces. They don't mark themselves as galleries because they cannot give you as much as the gallery could. Yes. So we go into work with these spaces in that understanding that there will be a cut from ourselves.
And I believe that hasn't changed. It changed like 50% quite fast, I think.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. Because one of the questions we also posted that it changed 50%, but also there is lack of printed catalogs now. So
Yes.
price increase of physical output that costs is like a kurang. Yeah. Okay. Okay, there's another question about community. I'm going to lump sum this to a bit. The question is, what are some of the collectives that you guys are in? That's why I think it goes again. And also, how important it is having community in sustaining your practice. I think already third covers speak just now, but I think we can just go by one, what are the collectives you are in and how important is it in your practice?
Okay, I'm not really in a collective at the moment, but my partner is also an artist, so we work together in the same house or in the same space. So I'm always constantly bouncing my ideas off of him and he off me. So I feel like the support that I need in the art making, I already have it, so I don't really need to go out looking for it. But I do have a lot of artist friends also, and there are also couples, like creative couples, and we find ourselves talking about the little problems that we have, like why does my partner's work look like mine now? Are we, is ours getting like intertwined too much? Is it okay? But yeah, it's great because I have my best friend at home and I can talk to him about whatever I need.
That's a flex right there.
I'm not scanning these or anything.
Simon, do you want to?
Yeah.
The question was, what are the collectives you are in, and also how is having a community has helped you sustain your practice, or if it doesn't even help you?
Okay, I guess to start from my own experiences, I didn't start with galleries reasons. I started more so from communities. I had a very free range time in my teen years. Zero supervision from my parents. not a bad thing, also not a good thing. But my first exposure to anything in terms of a community was graffiti artists. So it's interesting to see how, in terms of the art practice, the entire world is an art practice. Any walls empty or painted were their canvases, so you get to kind of see different ways of navigating, and there's a lot of running around and whatnot. But to kind of state, for me, I think in general, yeah, I'm just blanking out because of the light, sorry. Yeah, it's a light thing also for me. Okay, can you just ulang one more time because I had a thing in my mind that I really want to say.
Something about what are the collectives you are in, and also how does it help your practice?
So I've been part of a lot of collectives growing up, whether they call themselves collectives, but they are essentially different communities spread across, whether it's graffiti artists, whether it's visual artists in other ways, whether it's even ice hockey. Mine is quite spread across. I have so many different communities that I'm a part of, and they all teach me various different things. And I think for me, looking from a gender perspective, I'm a young woman who's late diagnosed autistic, so there are things that I miss out a lot when it comes to the idea that people view me as a young woman, is the aspect that, I go through sexual harassment quite a lot, whether it's in a lot in art or just in general in the world. So it was very imperative for me to have friends who understand this experience as a woman artist, as you would say. So I also have my girls who are also in the art practice themselves. So we, in a way, we're just friend group lah, but we kind of collectivize to help each other within this process, because care for us in the art practice has a lot to do with safety, protection emotionally and mentally, especially if something happens. We tell each other if somebody's a bit sleazy, somebody's a bit dodgy, what to know. I also actually originally used my name as Dan instead of Dani because it's a bit more ambiguous. And you'll be quite surprised at the level of treatment that I get just from the name alone. It's Dan, people would think I'm a guy. But when they see me, they're like, oh. And there's a change in the way they approach me after, in fact. I've had galleries who told me things like, you don't look like a bus, like most artists look like a bus driver, but you don't. I don't know what that means, but I think in a way he's trying to say that because I look commercially viable, you should take my art less seriously. And that has been quite a common theme because I work across art and fashion. So when it comes to my experience, not so much in a gallery perspective, but in the perspective that I myself have to navigate as a manager, as an artist, which most of the time we all do. But in that regard, perhaps not a gallery space, but I do commissions for brands. It's so much better in entertainment because it's not 50%, it's 100%. So that's a difference between, when you sell to a gallery framework, which is good in the extent that you're a fine artist of a certain degree, there's certain relevance and people write about your work, yada yada yada, and it's great. But there's also the other part where perhaps diversifying your practice is also good because you get 100% when you do commissions in the other realm of things. But one of the things I struggled with was there's this very uppity, gatekeepy thing that happens because if you're more commercial, then you're not as serious or your work shouldn't be taken critically as well. So there's this kind of like parameter that kind of happens in the art world where if you sell prints, your artwork that you made prints of, the value jatuh. There's this kind of like parameters in place. But I would say diversifying your income rather than it being a smart strategic choice, it's also unsurvival. And I think when it comes to young women, or just women in general in art, we have a different layer of experience and reality when navigating our art practice, whether it comes from, being a minority in practicing art to a certain extent, or just in general the fact that there isn't enough of a safety space or net for women in this collectors that heavily male. Yes. And in other ways, there are certain experiences that really leave a mark on us that most of the time we can only speak with one another to tell ourselves, to tell them that to be careful around certain people. And it's sad because it's an open secret, essentially, but it's just we can't do anything because it ties back to our livelihoods. But yeah, so I would say great part about being more commercially viable in terms of your art practice, your brands and whatnot is 100% goes to you. Whereas in the fine art gallery, you get the cut of like 50%. But if you build a certain relevance, I think you can negotiate perhaps more. So it's a lot to do with understanding the power dynamics in ways, how to kind of work around and how to negotiate these things and how to kind of protect yourself, which unfortunately is something you learn later in life. Yeah.
I'd say I also am not involved in any official practice or anything. Growing up, I feel I have worn many hats, but most of all, the only hat I ever wore was the one that didn't fit in, the one that didn't belong anywhere, no matter how much we looked for different groups or social circles or people or whatever. I was someone who, and still is to some extent, someone who's very individualistic, simply because I feel I'm an emotional porcupine to some extent. Since young, I think I've just developed that just out of whatever family growing up things, plus my own neurodivergent tendencies or whatever. But I've heard like, so when I was a kid, I'd always look into different things that I would be into, you know, whether it was like paleontology or whether it was fashion or bodybuilding, lifting weights. And then there were things I knew I was super averse to, which was things that were in real life I had experience being in teams, for example. Like I really don't like group dynamics. I hate working with other people. I just cannot stand two things. I can't stand the unpredictability and my own shortcomings. Honestly, like so I searched for these groups, like let's say for example I got into fashion to like broaden and like bikers and stuff like that. So I started going to these meetings and then I would go these things but I still never felt like I belong. Maybe it was because I was trying too many things and I couldn't actually form a meaningful relationship with any single one. But I think for me, like the people I want to address is the people who think that they can't be artists because of XYZ reason and end up not doing it. I think collectives start from bravery and start from courage and start from you picking up the initiative to just say, you know what, I can create something on my own and I can make something and I found like the people closest to me are not artists. In fact, like the last thing I'm interested in is more art. Like just simply because I breathe it, I think it, I live it, so I can't really expect anything else. So anyways, but yeah, so people I found have been that I've connected with are people that don't do art whatsoever, but somehow they are always slightly off. And like all my friends, I feel like all our friends are super neurodivergent. And the more we know them, the more we find out, especially when you don't expect that initially, you know, because and then over time you find out everyone is some sort of messed up. Where I just want to say that even those people who, like all my friends who are neurodivergent, but they work in, for example, like finance or whatever, it's always encouraging to see them pursue creative pursuits. And I think even like at the end of the day, you just need to normalize it. You just need to normalize this whole culture of creating and self-expression because it frees the soul and it, especially during hard times, this is what we really need, regardless of price or whatever. We just need more artists. I don't remember the question, I don't know if I answered it, but that's all I have to say.
That's awesome. Thank you, Simon. Actually, what you brought up, I also wanted to add to the lasagna was that I also, the question, the answer left my brain for you were talking about like how not belonging in actual completely belonging to collectives, being around, because I would also say that I also operate in that sense. Like I'm around everywhere, but I don't really spend enough time long enough in collectives. But what I've learned from jumping around is that diversifying your collective is great, not just for also like changing your mind and all that. It's also in a way you're advocating for art to be accessible, not just for the realm of artists and art consumer. Because like by the end of the day, the need for expression, no matter whatever form, is a human need, and it can translate to many good things and good change. That is deeper than just like standards, forms, whatever, all that like calculative level thing, because it taps into the desire, the human desire to express and navigate the unknown that we're all navigating in our life in whatever form. So diversifying your group and hanging out with like non-art things, go to non-art things sometimes, because I also get it. I get sick with art things sometimes. I work in art, I hang out in art, I'm sick of art.
There's so much more life out there for you, the artists, who only things about art.
So like diversify your circle, because by being in those spaces, also you invite them into the space of art that I feel in certain spaces can still feel very like elite or intimidating. So by making it accessible, by being in different spaces, you are advocating for accessibility in art just by being So I think that's a okay way to end the timing of 15 minutes. Anyone want to add anything before we do the book? Oh yes, okay.
So I have a question. Like, Aiden is also being very curious about Japanese and I'm somewhat chronically online. So I scroll a lot and I see like a lot of artists starting to use social media to push their work out. And I'm thinking like when you use social media, you turn from like a creative to a creative entrepreneur. You're practically marketing yourself because your art is, I'd say, your identity. So then people usually say you need to stick to like a certain art style so that you pop out in like so much input that people see on social media. So then my question is, number one, because I feel like as an artist, it's really nice to be able to explore different styles. So number one, how do you still push art styles that might not be like your typical, like what you sell usually? And then number two, how do you draw like the fine line between being an influencer where your art is influenced by the market or what people want, and then to balance out like first how being an influencer, and then second being like a true artist and pushing out what you like to draw and what you like to paint or do instead of just like following the market to earn money.
Well, thank you for that question, because this is a lifelong, I think, struggle for me, especially, I think. First, I did mention that I do a combination of art and fashion. And, yeah, so, as you know, a lot of people view art as whatever way, right? Fashion, something, whatever way. I also do sports, also whatever way. So I speak about these things to say that I started doing art at a very young age. I started taking in commissions when I was 14. So being thrown into I think at this time is